Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Gare, and I am here to talk to you about email localization and a little bit about me. I've been working with email since 2006, and in that time, I've had many different titles like email designer, email marketer, email specialist, email developer, email designer developer, and all those, and many different industries. And for the last 6 years, I've been working a lot with multilingual emails, which is pretty convenient because I'm talking to about that today. I joined Miro in 2021 in the lifecycle marketing team, and in that time, I've helped build their email design system. I work very heavily with data-infused transactional emails, and I work on their onboarding flow. And finally, I work a lot with their localization team. And a bit about Miro, we're an innovation workspace with over 90 million users around the world, and we support 8 languages in our email program. And for what I'm going to be talking about today, I have it broken down into 3 sections: why make the case for localizing, what I have learned about localized content, and then finally, how to actually build localized emails. But before I begin, I want to inspire you with a quote that I wrote with my friend Claude. And while you're busy being inspired, just a show of hands, how many people do not localize their email content right now? I can't really see anything because of the lights, but I assume it's like a fair amount. So this section is actually going to be for you. So why make the case for localizing? I like to start with fun facts, so let's do that. Okay, so did you know that there's over 7,000 languages in the world today? And I don't suggest supporting them all in your email localization platform, but this is a pretty mind-blowing fact for me. There's almost 200 languages spoken in the US alone. Companies that provide localized materials have a competitive advantage with their audience. The majority of online consumers prefer to buy when content is presented in their native language, and a healthy chunk don't want to buy at all. By the way, the little robot friend in the top left there, I generated with Miro AI, and my prompt was, illustrate me a cute little robot with a globe in its belly that symbolizes email localization, and this is what it gave to me. So that was pretty cute. And speaking of Miro, we did our own A/B testing to test the efficacy of our localization efforts. And we tested English content in our control group versus a user's preferred content in the variant group. And we got some interesting results. Pretty large improvement to our open rate with one test doubled the effectiveness of the open rate. We got a nice boost to our click rates. And finally, for our primary testing metrics, we saw a healthy about 25% bump. And I gotta tell you, this is not too surprising because people want stuff in their own language. To summarize, localization will boost your market reach and will have a tangible business impact for you. Delivering content in a user's preferred language will help build trust with your audience and provide a more consistent user experience. And finally, localized emails will help drive higher engagement by connecting with recipients in a more meaningful way. So what have I personally learned about localized content? So full disclosure with you, I'm not a copywriter or a content writer. So this is the perspective of an email developer who has to work with localized content. So grain of salt. And I always think of the acronym KISS when I work with localized content. And what does that mean? Well, it can mean keep it super simple, keep it short and simple, keep it simple and smart, which are 3 really good pieces of advice when writing source content for localization. In this context, it's not a band from the 70s, and I like how the emoji person in the top right is very concerned with the antics of Gene Simmons here, as most people probably would be. But KISS actually has a traditional meaning, which is keep it simple, stupid, but it's not a very nice thing to say. So let's just say, keep it simple, silly. And that's the strategy for source content. So you want to use clear, concise language and simple sentence structure. avoid idioms and cultural references and slang or complex metaphors that won't translate well into other languages. And speaking of translations, one strategy is to avoid using word-for-word translations. So, for example, our localization managers adapt English messaging for cultural context and the preferences of their audience. And they always support, or not support, consider local communication styles and the overall expectations of that audience. And this last point is, for me personally, but conditional text is actually really complicated when you start to localize it. So like some things that seem really simple in English, like adding an S to a word when you have like numerical data that's above one, it's super easy in English, but it's actually like really complicated when you start localizing that, because some languages will have different plural forms based on the count. Some languages have gender rules and different word orders, so it gets very complicated. And my general strategy in dealing with this conditional text is I separate those lines into separate items. So like using the plural example, if I have a statement with a singular word and then one with a plural, I will separate those as different conditions. And I just find that it's much easier way to localize this content. And in terms of layout considerations, some languages have really long words. For instance, German and Polish have roughly like 30% longer word length, and hyphenation will be your friend here, so you definitely want to check those out. And if you're a designer and you put text in your graphics, well, you should also remember to localize those as well. So be very, have a lot of consideration for when you're using text, when you know the content is going to get localized. And finally, text styling is actually pretty challenging when you don't read the language or don't understand the alphabet of the language that you're using. So work very closely with language managers to make sure you're putting all your bolds and your italics and your text links in the right position. Okay, so I actually have some real world examples to share with you that kind of encapsulates all of these ideas. And it's the Miro welcome email, the one that looks like a Miro board. And there's a few things I want to point out here. So all of the text that you're seeing here is live text with the exception of two elements. One is the UI in the top left where it says greetings, and then the bounding box with the four cursors around it are also a background graphic with the headline overlaid. And right away, we used very simple wording here. Welcome on board. Let's get started. The call to action is start creating in Miro, and so on and so forth. So we really kept things simple. And okay, two little more factoids. The cursor below the CTA is actually HTML, and Miro Hero is the fallback name in case we don't have the name of the subscriber. And finally, the Miro team in the from address is also a detail that we localize. So let's look at these. German. So right away, I had to shrink down the headline in German because it was really long and it would go outside the bounding box. Same with French. This one was kind of weird because the call to action got a little longer and the subheadline got a little shorter. Spanish, it's kind of wordy actually. Japanese is a really interesting one to work with. I do not read Japanese. I do not understand the alphabet of Japanese, but it looks kind of cool. So I had to work really closely with the localization manager to make sure that everything was QAing correctly here. Portuguese, another kind of wordy one. Korean. Okay, so this is interesting because our localization manager added that little wavy emoji into the headline because that speaks better to the audience that she supports. And finally, Polish. I don't know how I got this headline to fit at our standard headline size, but it did. And one other thing to note here is the hyphen in the subheadline, because long words will break your layout, so hyphenation will definitely be your friend. And to summarize this, keep things simple. Think about how we used very simple language in the welcome email in the headline. Our localization managers adapted the messaging to their audience. They didn't just translate one to one. I had to modify the layouts to account for when languages would have longer translation. And finally, all the graphics that we had to localize as well to give it that full, polished, and complete look. So now on to the section of how to actually build localized emails. And I don't know about you, but these two look like they're having a lot of fun. So I can tell they're working on something email related, because that's how I look when I'm doing email stuff. Okay, so prerequisites. So in order to send content in a user's preferred language, you actually need to know your user's preferred language. And I've seen or used 3 different methods for getting this kind of content. And the first is by region. So the idea around regional is that you localize your email into the predominant language of the region, and then you send it to the region. But this is actually kind of a flawed approach, because it doesn't really account for why your subscribers are in the region or even what their preferred language is. So anecdotally speaking, I've been living in the Netherlands for the last 6 years, and ik spreek een beetje Nederlands, but I'm not fluent by any means. And I get a ton of email in Dutch, things like my mortgage statement and my utility emails and all that. And those are the kind of things I would actually like to have a clearer understanding of. So how can we get a more accurate idea of what our users' language is? And one would be by their browser language. So the idea here is to detect the subscriber's browser language when they enter your website or app or whatever, and then you store this for later use, and then you use it. But then the third method is my favorite, and that is ask them. Like ask them on sign up, or in the preference center, or in that little pop-up that comes up that's like, sign up for the newsletter. Like maybe put like a little drop down that's like, what language would you like this in? And then they'll tell you and you'll know. Okay, so now we're going to talk about email development. So I want to share with you my mantra that I say a lot at work lately, which is emails are fucking complicated. I mean, they are. Like, you can have data issues and rendering issues and deliverability issues and domain issues and subscription issues and just things that are broken issues, and emails are really fucking complicated. I mean, do you agree with me here? Can you indulge me for a little bit of audience participation for a bit? Like, if I count down from 3, can you all just say emails are fucking complicated for me? All right. All right. Like, not on one, but like after. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Emails are fucking complicated. Oh. I kind of wanted to just end it right now. That was great. Now multiply that by however many languages you support, and localized emails are really, really fucking complicated, but don't panic. I'm here to help you. And I have 3 different methods that I've used to localize email content that I'm gonna share with you today. And the first one is dedicated templates, where you create one template per language that you support. And that's kind of it. Like, that's the whole strategy, like one email per language. And there's benefits and drawbacks to this. One is that it's very easy to do, and it gives you total control over your layouts. If you don't support a large language set, then it's probably better than not localizing at all. And for your analytics team, it's a bit cleaner, as each email will be a separate thing. So the segmented language audience will be separate. And the downsides are that version control and maintenance can give you nightmares when you have so many different versions. For instance, if you have a brand update that you have to do, and another thing is your user journeys will grow exponentially if you use individual templates. So if you're working on an onboarding journey and it has like 4 stages to it, and you support 5 emails, then that's like 20 templates right there. And overall, it just won't scale that well. But what is a method that will scale a bit better? And I'll tell you, it's what I call inlining. So the concept here is where you have a single email and then you nest all of your localized content in one single template and then use your ESP's scripting language to show that content based off of your user's language data. And I made this little graphic to symbolize how it's like one email and then like there's like the global header and footer and then inside the body is like this fake liquid syntax I wrote where, we got our German, French, Spanish, Japanese, and then finally English. There are pros and cons to this as well. It's more scalable than method one. It resolves to a single email to manage, so it makes it a lot more flexible for your version control and your maintenance. It's also pretty well suited for multi-step user journeys. The downside is that you need to have knowledge of scripting and you need to have your subscribers' language data in order to, show them the correct content. It can create massively large files when you have a bunch of nested information in there. But the good news is that when it sends, it'll like render out all the unused data and they'll get like a normal email. So don't worry about that. But overall, you have to do a lot of QA and it will require a lot of manual effort. And it's kind of a headache for the analytics team because they get one email and then they have to dig a bit deeper to find all the segmented data. But don't worry, I have some tips for inlining here. And overall, like conditional statements are super flexible. You can nest them within HTML tags. You can wrap them around blocks. You can wrap them around design system modules, and they work really well with localized images as well. One strategy that I employ is using English as fallback. So you can see in my little code block here, the else statement, the English headline is hiding down there. And the reason why I do that is because if we are missing any language data, then all the content will fall back to English and the user will not get a blank email. And full disclosure here, this is actually the system that Miro is using right now to localize our email, but we've been investigating in a more scaled up method of how we can do that. And it's something I've used in the past, what I'm going to call dynamic content mapping. And it's a system where your content and your presentation are separated and then kind of come together at the end to, in deployment, it's kind of like a Luke Leia situation. They're separated at birth and come back at the end to save the day and all that. But it's a data-driven mapping system that connects translation text to dynamic templates. And this is like really hard to explain. I think I designed this section like 3 or 4 times, but hopefully this will make sense to you. At its core are 3 basic components: a source template, a translation document, and a dynamic template. So let's talk about those. Your source template will be the blueprint of how your localized content will look. It's the origin of the email. It's where you're going to be doing most of your content work and design work. And it's basically a fully functional email in your primary language, English for my case. The translation document, it could be like a table or a JSON where you extract all that source content out of your source template and it gets mapped into the document. So if we're looking at the table here, you can see there's like different column headers, there's a key, and then different language values that will kind of come into play a bit later here. All that content is mapped to a different row. So this can change the amount of rows you might have depending on your design here. But for this example, I have headline, body 1, CTA, body 2. And a JSON is another translation document you can potentially use, but the way that it organizes data is slightly different. So there's an object, and it's for EN, it's for English, and inside that object are all these like string values that your dynamic template will actually extract and get injected into there. How you extract this content, you can do it by parsing or tagging, or maybe you have an AI friend, or sometimes you have to do manual labor. And the final component here is the dynamic template. And this is your source template converted into something with tokens or variables that form key value pairs with your translation document. We have our source template, translation document, and dynamic template. The translation document will have your source content. You need to send it out to get localized. And when you get it back, filled with a bunch of localized content, depending on whether you use tables or JSON, you can map it into your dynamic template a bit differently. So if you're using a table, CSV or tab delimited text or a data extension or something like that, you'll use a lookup function to match your subscriber's language data, and then it'll find the row, and then the different key value maps of the keys will inject that content into your dynamic template. Very similar to JSON, except the methodology for JSON is you use a for loop. So a for loop will loop through this JSON data, and when it hits a match, it will then take that content in the object and then map and inject it back into the dynamic template. What I'm not showing you here is a third little piece, which is like a mapping thing that tells the system what content to put where, but it's kind of boring looking, so I didn't really want to put it in here. But pros and cons. This method is highly scalable. It will enable hands-free copy updates if you have an integration working. So like as you add new content, a dynamic template will just automatically pick this up. The downside to this is that it's really freaking difficult to set up correctly. There's a large degree of complexity that will get added to your email production process, and it will require constant testing to ensure that the flow of data is working correctly and users are getting the correct content. And it's pretty resource intensive, but don't worry, I have some tips for you here. So how do you set it up, your tech stack? Well, that totally will depend on your tech stack. So your ESP might work better with tables, or it might work better with JSON. ESPs will integrate differently with different TMS platforms. And a TMS platform is a translation management service. And the idea behind the integration here is you want to get like a push-pull mechanic working, where when you have your source document that has your like source primary language content, you want to push that to your TMS system, and then your localization team will do their business in the system, and when they're all done, you will then get the pull mechanic back into your ESP, and then that is how you will get all that content into your dynamic template. This will require a ton of testing because there are a lot of moving parts, and you want to, again, be sure that you're showing the right content for the right users. A little side tip around RTL languages. This is a very unique challenge, but one method of doing this is where you will like wrap a conditional statement around different blocks that might be pre-programmed for RTL. You can also try doing this in a like system like Taxi for email, where you have different modules that you can like toggle for different things. And another way you could potentially try doing this is using conditional logic to change the LTR RTL style in the HTML itself. However, your mileage may vary here because some platforms like Salesforce will actually allow you to do that, where other platforms will not. To summarize here, dedicated templates will be very easy to start with, but not super scalable. Inlining will add a lot more scalability to your flow, but will increase the complexity and add a lot of manual effort. And finally, dynamic mapping has a huge lift to set up, but once it's set up correctly, it will be highly scalable and dynamic. And to wrap up what I've been talking at you about for I don't know how long, localizing emails will boost your email performance, have a positive business impact. The strategy for content writing is to keep things super simple and be wary of how localization can impact your layouts. And I also shared with you 3 different methods on how you can localize your emails and, consider the one that works best for you. and then, you just localize those emails. Okay, I'm going to share this super awesome quote with you one more time. And yeah, I think that's it. So thank you very much.